There are sounds a man learns to catalogue after enough years at a ceremonial post. The shuffle of tourist shoes on cobblestone, the click of a camera shutter, the low murmur of a crowd that isn't sure whether to stay or move on. I had them all filed away in some quiet corner of my mind by the time I reached my 7th year on the Varenthal forecourt. None of them required a reaction. That was more or less the entire point of being where I was. What I had not catalogued, what none of us had catalogued, because it had never happened before at that particular post, was the sound of a motorcycle engine revving at full throttle 6 feet from my left boot. I heard it before I saw it. A high screaming pitch, the kind that bounced off the iron gates and came back at you from 2 directions at once. Then the machine itself rolled up along the visitor's approach, a low, flat street bike, matte black with orange trim, the sort of machine built for nothing sensible. The rider wore a matching helmet, visor down, and he brought the front wheel to within a hand's length of the iron chain that marked the guard boundary. He sat there with the throttle open, blipping it in short, hard bursts, watching to see what I would do. I did nothing. That is not a simple thing to explain to someone who has never stood a ceremonial post. Doing nothing is not passive. It is an act of will performed in real time against every instinct a man carries. The noise was enormous, the kind that fills your skull and leaves no room for thought. The exhaust was oily and sharp in the back of the throat. I could feel the vibration through the cobblestones up through the soles of my boots into the bones of my shins. My eyes stayed on the middle distance, fixed on the stone pillar at the far corner of the approach. My chin stayed level. The rifle stayed in position, barrel at the precise angle I'd held it at since the start of the watch. The rider gave it a longer blip, held it at high revs for a full 4 or 5 seconds, then let it drop. Then blipped it again harder. He was performing for someone. I caught a second figure behind him, off to the right, phone raised, recording. The crowd that had been drifting past the forecourt railing began to slow. Phones came out. Some people stopped walking entirely. Within 30 seconds there were perhaps 40 people gathered along the far pavement, watching. I have thought about that moment many times since, about what he expected. The most common expectation in my experience is that a man in this uniform will either flinch or react, that the composure is a performance, thin and easily punctured. Some people test it with noise. Some test it with a finger in the face, a shout, a deliberate shove into the shoulder as they walk past. This one had chosen 300 cubic centimeters of internal combustion and a clear line of sight on my boots. He wanted me to step back. He wanted the crowd to see me step back. He wanted 17 seconds of footage that proved the ceremonial guard was exactly what the cynics said he was, a costume on a quiet afternoon, good for photographs and nothing more. My boots did not move. He rolled the bike forward until the front tire pressed against the chain itself. Not through it, just against it, the chain going taut under the pressure, pulling slightly at the post anchors. I registered it. I registered the crowd murmuring, a low collective sound, half uncomfortable, half entertained. I registered the second man moving along the pavement to get a better angle for the recording. I registered, too, something else, a quieter sound beneath the engine noise, one that had nothing to do with the man on the bike. It was the sound of boots on the inner forecourt stone. My relief man, Guardsman Pelling, had moved to the gatehouse door. He had heard the engine. The duty sergeant, Colour Sergeant Armfield, had a direct line of sight to the forecourt from the inner lodge window. I knew the sight lines from memory. Every man who served Varenthal knew them. Neither of them moved yet because neither of them needed to. The post was held. The chain had not been breached. The man on the bike had not crossed the threshold into the controlled perimeter. But he was about to make an error far costlier than crossing it. He dropped the kickstand, killed the engine, and swung off the bike with the easy confidence of a man who had never once been held accountable for anything by anyone who mattered. He pulled the helmet free, mid-20s, sharp-featured, with the particular look of a man who has mistaken an audience for immunity. He turned toward the crowd on the pavement, spread his arms slightly theatrically. Some of them laughed. He fed off it. Then he turned back to me, stepped closer, and said something I won't repeat, the kind of line a man tries on when he thinks an audience will carry him through anything. He paused for effect. Then he reached out and placed one finger on the iron chain, pulled it down slightly, and stepped across it. Not far, 1 foot over, deliberately, slowly, looking directly at my face the entire time. He got a reaction, not from me. From behind the iron gate, Colour Sergeant Armfield stepped out onto the inner forecourt walk and spoke 2 words to the duty constable. The Palace Constabulary maintains a permanent post at the Varenthal gatehouse, 2 officers on duty at all hours, positioned there precisely because the forecourt is a controlled perimeter, not a public thoroughfare. The The chain is not decorative. Crossing it is a chargeable offense under the household security provisions, and those provisions have teeth. The constable on duty knew his job and did not require further instruction. The rider heard the boots before he saw the uniform. He turned, and the constable was already moving toward the chain from the inside, his colleague peeling off to the right to come around the gatepost and approach from the flank. Neither officer ran, neither raised his voice. The approach was businesslike, unhurried, and entirely without the theatrical energy the rider had been generating for the past 5 minutes. The second man, the one with the phone, took a step backward on the pavement, then another. He lowered the device. Apparently the footage had taken a different shape than planned. The constable came through the gate, stepped over the chain, and spoke quietly to the rider. I could not hear the exact words from my position. I did not need to. The rider's posture changed within the first sentence. The shoulders came in, the chin dropped, the arms that had been spread wide for the crowd folded in against his sides. The performance dissolved as completely as if someone had switched off a lamp. He glanced at the crowd as though checking whether they could still save him. They had already stepped back. They couldn't. I watched none of this with my eyes. My gaze stayed forward. But a ceremonial guardsman develops peripheral vision that would surprise most civilians. 7 years of standing perfectly still at a post will sharpen it considerably. I tracked the shapes at the edge of my field. I saw the rider put his hands behind his back. I saw the second constable address the other man separately, gesturing at the phone. I saw at the far edge of the pavement a woman with a yellow jacket and a heavy camera bag, a proper photographer's bag, not a phone case, watching all of it with her mouth slightly open. She had come to photograph the changing of the guard. She was receiving something considerably more instructive. The motorcycle became the final administrative matter. It sat against the chain, kickstand down, blocking a portion of the visitor approach. The duty constable called it in. 12 minutes later, a vehicle from the household transport office pulled up at the forecourt entrance, and 2 men from the recovery detail began the methodical process of removing it from the perimeter. The rider watched this from the back seat of a constabulary vehicle, his helmet in his lap, the orange trim on it catching the afternoon light in a way that seemed almost cheerful given the circumstances. I was relieved at the end of my 2-hour watch, the usual rotation, unchanged by any of what had occurred. Guardsman Pelling came out and took the post. I walked the inner yard to the guardroom, stripped my white gloves, and logged the watch in the duty book. Color Sergeant Armfield was at the desk. He did not ask me how I found it. He looked at the entry, made a notation of his own, and said 3 words, "Post held clean." That is the whole of the recognition a guardsman requires. The machinery of discipline works because every component does its part without asking for more. The constables did theirs, I did mine. I learned afterward, through the duty sergeant's weekly incident summary, which I was shown as a matter of record, that the rider was charged on 3 counts under the perimeter security provisions. The second man received a formal caution and had his device examined. The footage they had intended to post was never published in the form they planned. A different version appeared, filmed by 4 or 5 people from the far pavement, and it showed nothing more dramatic than a man stepping over a chain, 2 constables walking calmly toward him, and his posture changing all at once. It circulated for a day or 2. The comments, I was told, ran heavily against the rider. I have no strong feelings about what the internet makes of these things. What the crowd saw or what anyone posted was never the point of standing the post. The point was the chain, 6 feet from my left boot, and the boot did not move. Not because I was performing composure for an audience of my own, and not because I was suppressing an impulse, because the job requires it. Because the job has required it every day I have worn this uniform, and it will require it every day I wear it from here until I don't. The bike and the noise and the man with his arms spread wide, those things came and went. They always do. Color Sergeant Armfield put his pen down that evening and looked out through the lodge window at the empty forecourt before he locked up. The cobblestones were clean. The chain was straight. The iron gates stood exactly as they always stood. "Clean," he said again quietly to no one in particular. He was right, he always is.